Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and even though we did take a very heart-wrenching L against the Vikings, there still were some positives and, of course, some negatives from that game. So, of course, we got to do a stock up, stock down report. We're going to have 5 stock ups, 5 stock downs. You can call it studs and duds, whatever you want to call it. 5 goats and woats, 5 fives, 5 lies, however you want to word it. By the way, we got to talk about the 5 positives from the game and 5 negatives. It's not going to just specifically be a player every time. Maybe it's 2 players. Maybe it's a certain position group. Maybe it's a certain thing about a player, not just the player overall, but like a specific trait of that player or coach or organization. So before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Man, subscribing to the channel helps me out so much, so please make sure you do that. And of course, I will be live streaming every Commanders regular season game. It's usually on Sundays. I do a live play-by-play analysis every Sunday, but this weekend we play Monday night, so make sure you pull up Monday night for that stream. And without further ado, let's get it. All right, so with me being such a glass half full type of guy, we'll start with the positives. You know, we'll do good news then bad news type of thing. And I think first up, we gotta go with Benjamin St-Juste, specifically with him being man-on-man with Justin Jefferson with no safety help for a lot of the game. You know how much that helps us allocate other resources to other areas of the field and other parts of the defense to be able to stop other parts of the offense. With Benjamin St-Juste on Justin Jefferson, again, without safety help, a lot of plays, not every play, but a lot of plays that he, especially the ones where he made good plays or he had really good coverage, and Justin Jefferson just being a top 10 receiver that he is, still making a catch, arguably top 5 receiver. A lot of those plays he didn't have safety help on an island. Justin Jefferson can go underneath, he can go west, he can go east, he can go north, he can hit him with a double move, whatever, and Benjamin St-Juste has to be ready to adapt. When he has safety help, he knows, okay, as long as I handle the underneath, we should be pretty straight. But when he has no safety help, the entire route tree is open against him, and he has no mental advantage over what he can allow and what he can't allow. So the fact that, first of all, Justin Jefferson, let's go ahead and talk about it now. One of the best route running receivers in the NFL, arguably the best route running receiver in the NFL. He's a top 10, arguably top 5 receiver. Some people probably feel like he's the best receiver in the NFL. And his best trait is route running and his ability to separate from receivers. And Benjamin St-Juste has sticky coverage against him the majority of the game. And a couple of passes, like the one time Benjamin St-Juste got beat pretty bad deep down the field, honestly, if Taylor Heinicke throws that ball, it's probably a little behind. Justin Jefferson has to come back to it, and Benjamin St-Juste is able to break it up. It was the play probably immediately after he had that sack, which was like immediately after the pass interference on the pick 6 that he had. We're going to talk about all that, of course. But that one time deep down the field where he got beat later on into the game, that was just a perfect ball from Kirk Cousins, man. And we're going to talk about Kirk Cousins later when we talk about another one of our studs, another one of our stock ups. But man, that was a perfect ball to Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson had a step on Benjamin St-Juste. But again, his best trait, and one of the reasons why he is one of the best receivers in the NFL, is his ability to separate from guys. And the fact that Benjamin St-Juste, with no safety help, was only one step behind him, and then it took a perfect ball from Kirk Cousins to be able to, I think that was their biggest passing play, their biggest play of the day, period. And that's why we're able to stop the run. Again, Benjamin St-Juste one-on-one with the top receiver of the other team allows us to use the other 10 players to stop everything else. And we're usually only rushing 4 anyway because our defensive line has been the best at getting pressure without blitzing. So that's 5 players. We already have Justin Jefferson taken care of. We have a lot of the run game, and we can get some pressure down with just 4 guys. So that's 6 players we have out there basically as additional help to stop everything else. That's why our defense has been so dominant. Just to let you know, the Commanders' run defense is now the first in NFL Outsiders DVOA metric. Dalvin Cook was only had 47. Jonathan Taylor only had 76 yards. Aaron Jones had 28. All of those top running backs rushed for 100 yards or less, and we even forced a fumble on Jonathan Taylor. You're able to do that, and you're able to allocate whatever resources you you need to stop the run, even if it includes the linebackers or safeties, because Benjamin St-Juste is out there on an island by himself with Justin Jefferson at times. It wasn't all game. It wasn't like he was traveling with them. I'm not saying he's Darrelle Revis or Deion Sanders, but he's the best corner we have on roster right now. And I think that's a huge compliment because Kendall Fuller, I felt like, had his best game yesterday. But Benjamin St-Juste was the one that was tasked with covering the Vikings' best offensive weapon, honestly. The majority of the game, again, by himself, no safety help a lot of the time. But going back a little bit, that Benjamin St-Juste pick six, after really looking at it, you kind of have to admit, I mean, he did pull on his shoulder and impede his progress of trying to come back to the ball. I still felt like that was a good play. I'm not mad at the call, but it's kind of one of those calls where you can kind of call that more often than it probably happens. Like, I'm pretty sure if I were to go back and look at the all 22, the Vikings DBs probably did that to Terry McLaurin at times and it wasn't called. So it's like, it's one of those calls where, yeah, I can see why you would call that, but at the same time, y'all are not being consistent. You probably could have called that against the Vikings quite a bit today, against a lot of teams trying to cover Terry McLaurin and our receiving core throughout this season. And so it just felt kind of like the worst time to call it against Benjamin St-Juste, his first interception, because every time he gets an interception, ends up being some type of penalty. And then it was going to be a pick six, and the game would have been over at that point. That literally would have been it. And then even after the penalty, the fact that Jack Del Rio was like, you know what? You got hated on. I'm going to let you go make a play. I'm going to blitz you. And then Benjamin St-Juste goes and gets a sack against Kirk Cousins. I love that whole situation. Pick six, call back. Jack Del Rio's like, I know you're probably mad about it. Take some of your anger out on Kirk Cousins. But instead of intercepting him, how about you bring him to the ground? I love that. I absolutely love that. And then again, when he gets beat shortly after that, I believe it's probably the next play or maybe like 2 plays afterwards. Again, no safety help. One-on-one with Justin Jefferson down the field. That's a ridiculous amount of trust from Jack Del Rio. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. Benjamin St-Juste is technically not even in his sophomore season, really. He only played like 5 games last year in his rookie season. He's a 3rd round pick technically in his rookie and a half season right now. And we have him covering Justin Jefferson one-on-one. That's crazy, man. And then number 2 for stock ups, their interior defensive line, man. Jonathan Allen, all pro this year. Daron Payne, right with him. Pay the guy. Even if, I mean, as much as I love Kendall Fuller, but like, if getting the $28 million back for releasing Carson Wentz at the end of this year, getting a little over $10 million to release Kendall Fuller, Benjamin St-Juste is your number 1 corner, or an elite number 2 corner. You draft your number 1 corner, or you draft your number 2 corner, Rashad Wildgoose in the slot. You know how much money we save, and then that's all of the money that we could put towards paying Daron Payne long term. Ideally, I would love to keep Kendall Fuller and pay Daron Payne and pay Montez Sweat and pay Chase Young and Cole Holcomb and Cameron Curl, but we already know that's just not how things work. So we got to figure out what we're going to end up letting go, because we're not going to be able to keep everybody. That's just not how it really works. I mean, maybe cap space skyrockets with a new TV deal, but I doubt it. We're going to have to find some way. And then even if it does, players are going to go based on percentage of the cap space, not how much money players in their position group were making the previous year. If the cap space goes up, players are going to want more money in their next deal. So if that doesn't really help that much. It helps some, but not as much as people probably think. But either way, man, we got to figure this thing out with Daron Payne. He's having his career season right now. Daron Payne already has a new single season career high with 5.5 sacks, and we're only halfway through the season. He's having his best pass rushing season of his career, and we're only halfway through. And he's been great against the run. And I'm not just talking about Daron Payne too, man. That man Jonathan Allen is balling too. And I felt like with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne having the game that they had, that should have been a win. And I felt like that was one of the main reasons why we should have won this game. Because Kirk Cousins, if anything, his kryptonite, his biggest weakness is pressure up the middle. But for some reason, and I earned a new level of respect for Kirk Cousins after this game, because he was getting killed. And I hate these excuses that I keep hearing for Taylor Heinicke, like the offensive line needs to be better. You're right, the offensive line does need to be better. But Taylor Heinicke wasn't getting beat up and mutilated and jumped and beat down like Kirk Cousins was. And Kirk Cousins was still delivering great, beautiful 50-yard bombs down the field to the sideline with good coverage. Those were some of the best throws I've seen Kirk Cousins ever throw in his career. And it was while Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne were literally on the way to blast him a lot of those throws. The throw I was talking about earlier to Justin Jefferson where he had Benjamin St. Juste beat by 1 step for like 40, 50 yards. Somebody from that interior defense, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, one of them came through and blasted Kirk Cousins. Like, and he can see it. He's looking at them. He's like, man, I know I'm about to take a huge hit. Let me get this ball off. And even Daron Payne acknowledged it in the press conference afterwards. He was like, man, I forgot exactly what he said, but he basically said something to the extent of like, Kirk balled out. We did everything we could to intimidate him. We beat him down. We kept hurting him. We kept hitting him. Even on plays where we didn't necessarily get a sack on him, he was on the ground after taking the big hit. And Daron Payne even acknowledged the fact that like, man, that man balled out today, man. He showed some heart. You got to give him credit. So there's just no, we're going to talk about Taylor Heinicke later, of course, when we do the stock downs, the duds part of this and the negatives. But I just wanted to go ahead and get that out the way because Kirk Cousins was going through way worse than what Taylor Heinicke was going through. And he still found a way to deliver, so there's no excuse. But back to the interior defensive line, man. I do not want to break up this interior defensive line. Love for Darian Mathis. Can't wait for him to come back. And I like a lot of what I've seen from John Ridgeway outside of that basically game-losing penalty at the end on special teams, roughing the center, all of that type of stuff. Other than that, I'm really excited about those guys. But at the end of the day, those guys are run stuffers. They're double-team eaters. They can't get to the quarterback like Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen can. For Darian Mathis never will probably do what Daron Payne can do as far as getting to the quarterback. I love for Darian Mathis. I love his potential. I love what I was seeing from him early. He looked like a better pass rusher than I even expected, but he doesn't look like what Daron Payne is doing right now. So we got to be able to keep those guys if we can, man. Find a way to pay them, in my opinion. Then number 3, Montez Sweat. Even with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne balling out the way that they did, Montez Sweat led the team in pressures and had one of the only 2 bat downs from the Washington Commander defense against Kirk Cousins. Jamin Davis also had a bat down. But man, Montez Sweat balled out, man. He was our highest graded defensive player from the day, and actually the highest graded player on our entire team according to Pro Football Focus from that Vikings game. It was Montez Sweat with an 83 overall grade, then Kirk Cousins with an 82.6, then Jonathan Allen with an 82.4, and then the guy we're going to talk about next, Jamin Davis, is 4th with a 74.9 overall grade. But Montez Sweat balled out, man. I mean, he had himself a really good day. Statistically, one of his best days. Now, it didn't feel as dominant as like the Titans game where he was making play after play, but statistically this was one of his best days, especially if we're talking about total pressures. He had 6 pressures, 4 hits, and 2 hurries. That's crazy. With a bat down, like I already said. Shouts out to Montez Sweat. Y'all already know how I feel about my Atlanta people, man. Including Jamin Davis. If they're balling out, I'm gonna be their biggest fan. If they're letting us down, I'm gonna be their biggest critic. Same goes for Montez Sweat, Jamin Davis, Antonio Gibson, and Taylor Heinicke. Again, we're gonna talk about Taylor Heinicke later. Now, speaking of Jamin Davis, first of all, the fact that he played 82% of snaps and John Bostic played 65%, those were the only linebackers to play. I believe that there were times where Jamin Davis was the only linebacker on the field, and then we just had a bunch of DBs, or we had one extra defensive lineman. Like sometimes we'll have John Ridgeway as the nose tackle with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne as interior defensive linemen around him, like 3 techs. So Jamin Davis, man, all of that playing time. I mean, the worry coming out of training camp and preseason that he may not even be starting, where when Cole Holcomb is hurt, him and John Bostic, David Mayo was hurt as well. They're the only 2 linebackers that touch the field, and again, he played 82% of the snaps and took full advantage of it. You can argue this was his best game of his career. He had 5 tackles, even though he was involved with more than that, but he was only credited with 5. He had 1 tackle for loss. He blew up a big time screen. He had 4 pressures. Pro Football Focus actually gave him our 2nd highest pass rushing grade of the day, only behind Jonathan Allen, who had a 91 pass rushing grade. Jamin Davis had an 84.7 pass rushing grade. And then, of course, like I already mentioned earlier, Montez Sweat had 1 bat down. Jamin Davis had the other one, and I believe that was on a blitz too. He was blitzing Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins tried to throw it. He jumped up and batted it down. That's that athleticism. But against the run, he's been so much more confident. He's playing faster against the run, against in coverage. I mean, he's just a way better linebacker now. I wouldn't necessarily say he's playing like a Pro Bowler yet, but I'm loving what I'm seeing from him, especially these last few games. Before Cole Holcomb got hurt a couple of games ago, he had his best game of the season, and Jamin Davis is finally starting to turn into a real trustworthy, consistent, and dependable NFL linebacker. This linebacker core is kind of shaping up. I would still love a third guy that has like an elite size and length and athleticism. But right now, we're straight with Jamin Davis and Cole Holcomb. They are better this year than I even expected. Especially Jamin Davis, man. He's been balling out. And again, you can argue this game against the Vikings was probably his best game of his career. But then you can kind of say the same thing about the Colts game. You can say that about a couple of other games this season. And then number 5, man, shouts out to that ref that gave us that touchdown from Taylor Heinicke to Curtis Samuel. That throw was, first of all, terrible. Triple coverage. If it weren't for the ref, that's easily intercepted by the DB. But the ref literally truck stick, set a mean illegal screen on the DB. I mean, literally took him out of the play. DB literally waiting for the ball to come straight to him. Out of nowhere, ref comes taking him out of the play. I mean, it was so beautiful. It was something like a Disney movie. Like fate was on our side. Like we should have won that game. Somehow, and we're going to talk about Taylor Heinicke later, but the fact that we even sold that game with a ridiculously unique opportunity like that, I don't remember another time a ref has ever, I mean, refs have been in the way, they've tripped players, but I've never really seen them literally truck stick a player. I mean, it literally looked like it was some betting odds, Las Vegas stuff going on behind the scenes. Like we paid him, like he was a double agent type of thing. And I don't think it's a big coincidence that once Dan Snyder announces that he plans to sell the team, he hasn't even sold it yet, we're starting to finally get some even calls and even some advantages from refs. Because again, the Benjamin St. Juste thing, when you go back and look, that kind of was a pass interference. I could see why that was called. The only problem I have with it again is that I felt like they could have called the same thing against other Vikings DBs throughout the game. But that Benjamin St. Juste play isolated is a pass interference in my honest opinion. But we got the biggest help from the refs of the day. The Vikings, you can say whatever you want about the refs, maybe cheating for them a little bit, but we've never had to worry about a ref taking our safety out of a play that for what should have been an interception and it turning into a touchdown. We got the biggest help from the refs, so shouts out to the refs. Stock up to the refs, man. They're finally starting to hate on this list now that Dan Snyder has said that he plans on selling the team. I can't wait for him to actually sell the team. Maybe we start getting calls like Dallas and the Chiefs once Dan Snyder's gone, because I really feel like the NFL is just being petty and hating on us as far as calls go because of Dan Snyder. I just feel like that's like an internal boycott. Roger Goodell just whispering in the refs' ears, make it hard for them. Make sure the Commanders keep losing, the Redskins, the Washington football team keeps losing, so that the fans can keep rioting and eventually Dan Snyder will leave. All right, now on to the stock downs. And there were plenty to point out. And I feel so sorry for the defense because the defense deserved this win. The defense did everything they should have. I mean, the 7-1 Vikings, this was one of their lowest offensive outputs all season. This was the lowest amount of points they've scored all year, other than their one loss against the Eagles where they only scored 7 points. Every other game this season, other than that one Eagles game, they scored 23 points or more. And honestly, Taylor Heinicke gave them 7 of those points. So honestly, they only truly earned 13 of those points. Because it wasn't even like it was necessarily a great play by the Vikings. It was just a terrible throw by Taylor Heinicke. It wasn't even like the Vikings defense like made a great play or anything. So it's more so Taylor Heinicke lost the game than the Vikings won it, honestly. But either way, even including those 7 points, that's the lowest the Vikings have scored any game this season other than the Eagles game where they lost 24-7 and were completely dismantled. The defense deserves better, man. I mean, we've been winning in spite of the offense lately. I hate this logic of we're on a win streak, so don't change anything. I could have told y'all a long time ago when we met up with the Vikings something was probably going to happen and be the reason why we end up losing this game. This is not a formula for sustained success for long-term winning at all. Again, I'm gonna say it again. I keep saying this stat, but I guess a lot of people just aren't hearing me. During our 3-game win streak, again, not including this Vikings game that just happened, the Commanders won 3 games in a row while only scoring 52 points. The fewest by an NFL team during a 3-game win streak since the Broncos in November of 2011. So going into this Vikings game, this was one of the flukiest 3-game win streaks in NFL history. We had a historically terrible offense 3-game win streak wise. According to how good your offense should be when you're on a 3-game win streak, we were historically bad and the worst offense to go on a 3-game win streak since the Broncos in November of 2011. That's not sustained success. This defense deserves better. This defense is good enough for us to be 7-2, honestly. After they finally figured it out, after the Detroit Lions game, they just started to figure something out kind of in that second half. Ever since then, they've played well enough to win all of these games. But I'm digressing. We'll get to the offense soon. But the first stock down we got to talk about is Rivera's time management and situational awareness. I mean, it's not really too much to dive into. It's been all season I feel like he's cost us, you can argue, 2 or 3 games because of it. I mean, the terrible challenges like the one he had against the Vikings where, first of all, 3rd and 1, you don't believe in your team to go ahead and pick that up. And then when we went out there, we gave the ball to Armani Rogers, he got 20 plus yards on it. Like, we could have done that without the challenge. I mean, you lost the challenge anyway, so it literally didn't affect anything positively as far as us getting that 3rd and 1. Nothing changed. We would have gotten that 3rd and 1 whether you challenged it or not. So that was the first part that was terrible. Second of all, it was a bad challenge. It just didn't even look like he got the first down, in my opinion. Even live, I just wouldn't have challenged it, even just off the fact that it didn't look like we should even win the challenge. At the very best, you could have hoped for maybe the call on the field was first down and then it was irreversible evidence, but like, it wasn't even that. The call on the field was 3rd and 1, and there was nowhere near enough evidence for you to even possibly think that challenging that would work in your favor. And then 3, because of that lost challenge, we only had 1 timeout remaining for the entire game, and I think he called that challenge sometime in the 3rd quarter. It wasn't even like in the clutch time, like the last 5 minutes of the game. We really need this first down. We need this momentum. It was 3rd and 1. We were going to get it anyway, so it was just so much stupidity behind that. And just overall time management, I hate how we manage time going into halftime. Other teams are aggressive. You saw how the Vikings marched down the field on us with like only 40-something seconds left, went from their own 25 to almost scoring a touchdown if it wasn't for Benjamin St-Juste, who we talked about earlier, having that great play to hit the ball up. I can't believe I forgot to talk about in the Benjamin St-Juste section of this video that play, because when he was defending Justin Jefferson one-on-one again, batted the ball up, Danny Johnson comes down with the interception, the momentum completely shifted, because from there we go into halftime, then we come out, Antonio Gibson has a big run back, our offense scores a touchdown, we take the lead, and we literally have momentum for the remainder of the game up until the point that Taylor Heinicke throws that awful interception. And it really started with Benjamin St-Juste. But either way, going back to what I was talking about, I hate the fact that other teams are aggressive with 40 seconds left, a minute or less left at halftime. They try to go score, we just take knees. And then on defense, Rivera doesn't know if he wants to call timeouts or not, and then he'll call the timeouts, and then we'll go out there and run the ball from our own 25-yard line with 40 seconds left. He's literally done that multiple times this season. I don't get it. And then the time management with that challenge and everything, it's just so bad, Rivera. I hate it. Him as a strategist, as a time manager, his situational awareness, awful. Love him as a leader, love him as a guy, like as far as like the spirit of the team, the mantra of the team, the discipline and all of that. But everything else, as far as like play calling, situational awareness things, terrible. Number 2, Scott Turner overthinking things. Now, he had a couple of plays, handful of plays, I would say like 5 to 10 that you could argue he looked like a genius. It looked like Andy Reid was out there sometimes. But then he had a lot of plays where it was like, what are you even thinking, sir? What were you thinking? And that's one of my main problems with Scott Turner, is that he overthinks things. First of all, I feel like we don't target our best players enough. I hate the fact that we use them as distractions. Now, he's gotten better with that the past few weeks, but still overall, Scott Turner is definitely a major problem, that you're an inconsistent play caller, and that's leading us to losses. Now, like I've already said in my review video of the game, Scott Turner and Rivera are easily in my top 5 reasons why we lost that game. But number 3 stock down, Taylor Heinicke is the number 1 reason. First of all, Taylor Heinicke's limitations is the reason we're even in this situation to where he has to be clutch, like to where our defense has to make a play. Our defense is playing at an elite level right now. Again, according to DVOA, our defense is the best run stopping defense in the NFL, and we're not far behind as far as pass defense as well, and points allowed, all of that type of stuff. We're really dominant in a lot of different areas, and now that we're finally starting to get some turnovers, we're going from a suffocating defense to an elite defense almost. I feel like Chase Young is that last missing piece that's going to turn us into an elite defense, and it's just like, man, this defense deserves better, bro. Again, the statistic I gave you earlier about how historically bad our offense has been on a 3-game win streak, this offense has not deserved this 3-game win streak, but this defense definitely does, and they deserve to win that Vikings game. Again, Taylor Heinicke is the main problem. He's not the only problem. Hate the fact that people hear me talk about Taylor Heinicke's negatives and think I'm just saying that he's the only problem. But if you think Taylor Heinicke's not the number 1 problem in that game, even the Colts game, we shouldn't be in a situation where we only have 7 points and we need to score 10 points in the last 5 minutes of the 4th quarter. We're in that situation mostly because of Taylor Heinicke. Again, there's problems all over. There's Scott Turner's play calling. There's the offense offensive line, which we're going to get to later, but it's Taylor Heinicke more than anybody else. And we're going to talk about it with point 4, why you can tell it's Taylor Heinicke if you were to replace him with other quarterbacks around the NFL right now. But yeah, it's his limitations as to why we end up in these bad situations to where we need him to even go clutch mode. I love him in the clutch. That's his bread and butter. But we shouldn't even be in these situations again in the Colts game where we need to even score 10 points with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. We only have 7 points entering the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter of the game because Taylor Heinicke's limitations, missing open receivers, overthrowing guys, underthrowing guys, making bad decisions, all of that type of stuff. Now, I do agree Taylor Heinicke is probably better for this offense because this offensive line isn't good, and Carson Wentz is a statue in the pocket. When this offensive line breaks down, he's atrocious. In a clean pocket, Carson Wentz is better than Taylor Heinicke. But how often are you going to have a clean pocket with this offensive line? So Taylor Heinicke makes more sense with the way that this offensive line is set up right now than the Carson Wentz. I agree with that. But I'm to the point, definitely, let's just go ahead and throw Sam Howell out there because he has the same exact skill set, but you can probably add in the fact that he'll potentially be able to read defenses better. Even if he doesn't read defenses better today, he eventually should be able to because Taylor Heinicke isn't that great at reading defenses. And then as far as his best trait, pocket mobility and being able to make plays on the fly, Sam Howell has a higher ceiling for that, of course, especially since he has a stronger arm. He can make crazier off-platform throws than even Taylor Heinicke can. But I mean, Taylor Heinicke, come on now, 53.6 completion percentage against a defense that honestly isn't even that great. 149 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, a 77.8 passer rating is not good. That's not winning football. Even though he's technically only 2 of the 3 wins that we had in that historically terrible offense of a win streak. Those 2 games, he was our starting quarterback. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, we're winning. But that's the same logic people use for Jimmy Garoppolo. He just wins. Even though it's like literally the entire team carrying him on their back to win these games. The special teams making plays and the defense shutting down Green Bay in the playoffs last year. You saw what happens when Jimmy G runs into a better quarterback, just a quality quarterback, an above average quarterback when they ran into Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs in that Super Bowl. The 49ers were the better team up and down literally in almost every way except for quarterback, and you can argue, I guess, skill position players. And you saw the fact that the way that they jumped out to a big lead and the Chiefs had to fight and claw their way back, Pat Mahomes just simply outplayed Jimmy Garoppolo. That was the difference. And we're going to run into that problem consistently if you have Taylor Heinicke at quarterback. And I'm not even a huge Sam Howell fan. Again, if I had to pick between the two who I would prefer to have the better career, it's Heinicke. He's from Atlanta. I want him to be great. But he's obviously limited. I just don't know why a lot of y'all don't see it. Y'all get a slice of success. We're finally not terrible. We're average. And y'all don't want to let go of average and risk it for the chance to be great because you're too worried about being terrible. Y'all different from me, man. Y'all got it. Like I said, the worst thing to be is perpetually average in the NFL to me, really in sports, period, man. Y'all got it. Number 4, the decision to pass on Justin Herbert, Justin Field, and Tua. And then we're just trying to make do and put bandages, trying to bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick. We brought in Taylor Heinicke. He's the starter last year, and it was fun, but I don't know why people expected us to go far with that formula. And then we had all of the injuries. And then this year, you try to put a Band-Aid over the situation with Carson Wentz, even though he has a ceiling to him, so I can kind of see the attraction with that. But please go draft your quarterback. I've been screaming draft your quarterback for years now, and every time we try to put a Band-Aid over the quarterback position, it ends up failing. They're probably not going to bench Taylor Heinicke anytime soon, but at some point, we got to see Sam Howell start some games for us, even if you just wait till the bye week so he can get 2 weeks to prepare for the Giants. I don't care, man. Sam Howell needs to start some games this season because, first of all, I hate the logic that if you throw Sam Howell out there, it shows you're tanking. I just don't understand what about Sam Howell is so much worse than Taylor Heinicke to where it just feels like we're tanking, because Taylor Heinicke isn't producing much offense anyway, like I've already given y'all the stats for it. But also, can we please see what our 5th round quarterback has before we go draft a guy in the 1st round of this upcoming draft? But if we don't, if Taylor Heinicke ends up riding out the rest of the season, it is what it is. Don't let drafting Sam Howell late in this past draft stop you from taking a 1st round quarterback. I don't care. If we don't see Sam Howell throw a single NFL pass in a regular season game, do not let that stop you from taking either of those quarterbacks if you want them. Now, if you believe in Sam Howell, if you see something behind the scenes, like how the Seahawks saw something behind the scenes with Geno Smith before this season started and he's surprising everybody, if we just see something in Sam Howell that nobody else has seen yet, even us fans, then okay, that's cool. But then that means Sam Howell should be a starting quarterback next year at the very least. We got to figure something out. We should not finish the season without Sam Howell starting a few games, especially with the schedule getting more difficult. And I just don't see Taylor Heinicke providing us enough of a spark to be able to beat these teams that's arguably better than us top to bottom. Our defense is easily good enough to beat all of these teams. We gave the Eagles one of their most struggle offensive outputs. They had to really grind and win a lot of 50-50 balls and get lucky sometimes to win that game against us. Our defense is good enough to win and beat a lot of these teams that people think are better than us. I mean, the way we were supposed to beat the 7-1 Vikings just this past game. Nobody had us winning that game as far as national media and film analysts, football analysts, and stuff like that. But our defense was the reason that the Vikings only had 7 points going into the fourth quarter. Taylor Heinicke gave the Vikings 7 points, and then the Vikings were able to get their own 6 points against our defense. But again, the Vikings legitimately only scored 13 points on us for real. This defense is good enough to win against really anybody on our schedule. But Taylor Heinicke, love him. Again, I want to see him be great, but he just doesn't have it in him. But going back to my main point, imagine if we had what Justin Herbert is, or what Justin Fields has been the past few weeks, especially the game this past Sunday, or Tua, what he's doing this year. Imagine if we had one of those guys. We would literally be 7-2. At the very worst, 6-3 in my opinion, if we had either of those three quarterbacks. So my fourth stock down was the decision to keep passing on these top quarterbacks that we had right in our grasp. And I love Chase Young, but you had the opportunity to get Justin Herbert and Tua. We had Justin Fields right there in trade up range if we really wanted him in the Justin Fields draft. It's just that this is coming back to bite us. First of all, because we're struggling to win consistently, or to at least have good offensive output consistently. And then you see these quarterbacks that we passed up on balling out. And then the fifth and final stock down, the offensive line that allowed 17 pressures in Sunday's game against the Vikings. Now, like I already said earlier, no excuse for Heinicke. I know the offensive line isn't great and they allow 17 pressures, but we had more QB pressures and more QB hits on Kirk Cousins than they had on Heinicke. And Kirk Cousins was standing firm in the pocket and delivering perfect passes. Meanwhile, Taylor Heinicke is overthrowing a 6'6" tight end by 10 yards, and he overthrew him like 3 times in that game while he was wide open for at the very least first downs. And then on that play too, where he overthrew Logan Thomas, he had 2 other guys open. I think it was Terry and maybe Curtis Samuel, somebody. There were 2 receivers open. And then even Logan Thomas, he wasn't as open as the other 2 guys, but he was still open. So it was the bad read to not throw it to the more open guys, and then it was the terrible accuracy and just the whole overall terrible fold and sell of a game to just completely miss Logan Thomas by 10 yards. It would have taken 2 6'6" Logan Thomases to catch that ball, which is absolutely ridiculous. But going back to the offensive line and why they need to be brought up, they have been bad. 17 pressures is inexcusable. Now, again, to my point, 17 pressures doesn't equal 3 sacks for Carson Wentz. For Taylor Heinicke, 17 pressures equals 3 sacks, which is pretty good. But again, I feel like Sam Howell can do the same thing, if not better. But I got to give Taylor Heinicke credit. 17 pressures on Carson Wentz is probably 8 or 9 sacks, where again, Taylor Heinicke was only sacked 3 times. So you got to give him credit for that. But the O-line, man, we got to be better. We just simply got to be better. Now, granted, we do have a lot of injuries. Chase Roullier, our starting center, is out. Wes Schweitzer, our best backup interior offensive lineman. You can argue you prefer to have Wes Schweitzer instead of Tyler Larson, who's starting at center right now, over Sadiq Charles and Trey Turner at right guard and Andrew Norwell at left guard. So he's honestly one of our top 3 best offensive linemen. We're missing 2 of our top 3 offensive linemen. And then Charles Leno just had a bad day. Cornelius Lucas, who's actually been playing pretty well lately, had a bad day. Samuel Cosme is still hurt. First it was his hand, and then he had a random illness before the game. So I'm not even sure if he's ready to play against the Eagles. Our offensive line is in shambles right now. We're playing with a lot of backups. So it's like you can't be too mad at them, but at the same time, it's the NFL. Y'all need to go out there and produce and protect these quarterbacks, whether it's Taylor Heinicke or whoever it is. But either way, there's no excuses for Heinicke, because Kirk Cousins was going through way worse than what Taylor Heinicke was going through, and he was still able to make plays. But still, at the same time, you want your offensive line to be good enough to where your quarterback doesn't have to deal with that. We deliver the punishment. We shouldn't also take the punishment as well. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors, whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.